Hello and a very warm welcome to the Analyst dated 29 September 2025, brought to you by Vajiram Ravi, wherein we'll be covering the 7 set of current affairs issues which are featured in today's newspaper. The handout of this very discussion is available in the comment section below for your future reference. Beginning with the analysis section, firstly, we'll be looking into the issue of food wastage, the reasons, the steps taken, and what more needs to be done in order to ensure that all the agriculture produce reaches from the farm to the plate of every Indian. Moving on to the second topic, herein we'll be understanding the new and the emerging trends when it comes to work culture, what a healthy work culture actually implies, and what all challenges are there when it comes to work culture in India. Moving on to the simplified section, herein we'll be covering the 5 set of current affairs issues in the most simple manner possible, and we'll be doing value addition which would be relevant from the prelims perspective. So stay tuned. Now, beginning with the first topic, which is dealing with food wastage, a write-up has appeared in The Hindu. Why? Because today the world is observing International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste. This particular topic we can associate with GS Paper 2 issues relating to hunger. First, let's just understand that what do we mean by food waste and what do we mean by food loss. So, if you go by the definition given by UNEP, food waste usually occur at the consumption or at the retail stages. In simpler terms, if I overordered the food when I went to the restaurant and I did not completed that particular food and I threw that in the dustbin. Okay, so even if a food was suitable for human consumption, then also if it is discarded or thrown in the dustbin, that is basically referred to be as food waste, and it happens at the consumption and at the retail stages, basically at the household level or in the restaurant. Then what do we mean by food loss? Food loss basically refers to reduction in the mass or the nutritional value of a particular agriculture produce. Why? Because of the inefficiencies in the agriculture supply chain. That means there are inadequate cold storage infrastructure, there are inefficiencies in the transportation facilities, etc. So, food waste happens at consumption and at retail stages, whereas food loss happens because of the inefficiencies in the supply chain. And if I club the two, food waste and food loss, it becomes food wastage. So, food wastage encompasses both of these, food waste as well as food loss. Now, why it is problematic? Because at the global level, what we are seeing that 1/3 of all the food that is produced is either lost or wasted. And when you talk about Indian economy, it is having economic implications also. If you go by the study carried out by one of the subsidiary of NABARD, that is NABARD Consultancy Services, it carried out a study in 2022. And what we figured out that because of the post-harvest losses, India is losing 1.5 trillion rupees on an annual basis, which roughly boils down to 3.7% of agriculture GDP. And another interesting fact which the study points out is the perishability is quite high when you talk about fruits and vegetables. Okay, they are more vulnerable to food loss as compared to paddy and wheat. And this is the reason you can understand that why farmers in India are not incentivized to move in the direction of crop diversification, because cold infrastructure is less, and if they grow fruits and vegetables, the crops would get perished. Okay, perishability level is quite less when it comes to paddy and wheat. Now, if you go by UNEP Food Wastage Index report of 2023, India stands at the second position when you talk about household wastage of food, followed by China. So it points out that roughly 69 million tons of food is wasted annually in Indian homes, which is roughly 50 kgs per person. So 1/3 of all the food which is produced in India, that is getting wasted. Now, what are the causes of food wastage in India? First and foremost is the inefficiencies in the supply chain. Okay, there are lack of cold storage infrastructure, and that is the reason you must have seen the images on the internet, the food getting rotten in the godowns of FCI. Why? Because there is lack of scientific storage infrastructure. And according to Food and Agriculture Organization, 40% of food that is produced in India is lost. Why? Because of lack of cold storage infrastructure. Then we are witnessing food waste. Why? Because of big fat Indian weddings. Why we have big fat Indian weddings? Because no matter how great the preparation is, one or the other relative would be having complaints with respect to the food arrangement. Okay, so the bright side, try to create a lot of diversity, okay, when it comes to the buffet system that is there. And what happens after seeing that buffet system, a lot of people tend to take a lot of items, okay, and ultimately they are not able to finish those items, and that is going to the dustbin. So if you go by the study carried out by NABARD Consultancy Services, 10 to 20% of the food is getting waste. Why? Because of this lack of proper planning when it comes to the weddings. Then we are witnessing post-harvest losses because of inefficient transportation facilities connecting the rural areas with the urban areas. And when it comes to the trucks which are carrying the food items from rural area to urban area, they have to travel a long distance. And we lack refrigeration facilities in those trucks also. That is also one of the reasons why we witness post-harvest losses. Then there is poor meal planning, especially in the urban areas. Now because of Zomato and Swiggy, it has become very easy for you to order the food. And at times what we have seen, the urban people tend to over-order the food. They are not able to effectively plan their meal and ultimately throwing the food in the dustbin. And this is something which you can, commonly witness in the restaurants. Food is being over-ordered and then ultimately going to the dustbins. However, when you compare it with the rural areas, here the food wastage is less. Why? Because here the cattle are being reared by the village people and ultimately whatever leftover is there, that is being fed to the animals. Okay, that is why food wastage is less in the rural areas as compared to the urban areas. And another reason is inadequate development of food processing industries. If we have adequate food processing industry, they can actually do the value addition and enhance the shelf life of the agriculture products, like tomatoes being converted into tomato ketchup. Okay, so since we have not been able to effectively tap the potential of food processing industry, that is another reason why we are witnessing food wastage in India. Now, why we need to address this particular issue of food wastage? What is the implication? First implication is, we are wasting the resources, the water which was used to irrigate that particular agriculture crop, the labor that was invested, the cost beared by the farmers on fertilizers, etc. So we are wasting the resources, energy we are wasting, okay. In addition to that, this food wastage is also adding to the climate change. So if you go by the study conducted by FAO and National Institute of Food Technology, Entrepreneurship and Management, which carried out a study with respect to 30 commodities, what we got to know, that food loss with respect to these 30 commodities is generating over 33 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emission each year. So it is not just leading to resource wastage, it is also aggravating the climate change. Then it is threatening food security. India, despite being a food surplus country, is not able to ensure that every Indian goes to bed with a filled belly. And the amount of food that we are wasting, it is enough to feed the people who are there in a populous state like Bihar every year. And at the other end, because of this food wastage, what is happening? Social inequalities are aggravating. At one level, you have the urban people who are over-ordering the food and throwing the foods in the dustbin. At the another level, you have a group of people who are living on footpaths and they are not able to have even 2 meals a day. So this is aggravating social inequalities also. And this is the reason why India's performance is quite poor when you look into the Global Hunger Index 2024. India's rank was 105th out of 127 countries and India is under the serious category status. And this is the status which is also shared by countries like Pakistan and Afghanistan. Another implication of this food wastage is hidden hunger, malnutrition, anemia among the women. Okay. Then it is hindering our progress when it comes to Sustainable Development Goal number 2, which talks about zero hunger, Sustainable Development Goal number 12.3, which talks about reducing food waste at retail and consumer level. I hope you understand why it is written food waste and not food wastage. Then economic loss, we have already studied that how the study carried out by the subsidiary of NABARD in its 2022 report has pointed out that post-harvest loss are costing roughly 1.52 lakh crore rupees annually. Then What all steps the government has taken to basically address this issue of food wastage? So government is improving the cold storage infrastructure. It is giving a boost to food processing industries under the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana. Then we are trying to reduce the food waste by Indian Food Sharing Alliance, wherein the Food Safety and Standard Authority of India is collaborating with food banks, and it is making sure that the surplus food which is reaching to the food banks is, distributed to the people who actually need that particular food. Then government has included the Sustainable Development Goal number 12.3 in the National Indicator Framework. And after doing this, the government has carried out 3 nationwide post-harvest survey on 50 plus crops, so that we can adequately understand that what is the amount of food loss that we are witnessing with respect to a particular crop. And accordingly, based on the data, we can move in the direction of evidence-based planning. Then the FAO has also come up with its food loss app, okay, which is being used by farmers, organizations and governments in 30 countries to track the food losses across the value chain. And different countries, by using this particular data set, they can also move in the direction of collaboration, okay, to reduce the food wastage at the global level and to make sure that adequate amount of food aid is provided to the children who are there in the conflict region, okay, like the Gaza region. What needs to be done? So first and foremost, in order to reduce the food loss component of food wastage, what we need to do? We need to strengthen the cold storage infrastructure. So in this respect, the government should make sure that we have adequate cold storage infrastructure, warehouses, and we should also make sure that there is refrigeration facility even in the trucks which are carrying the agriculture product from rural areas to urban areas or to the market. Then we need to shift to circular economy. Let's suppose there is some amount of food which is not fit for human consumption. So what we need to do? We need to reuse that for making biocompost, okay, for producing bioenergy. For example, recently we have discussed that how the Indian Oil Corporation is using reused cooking oil to make sustainable aviation fuel. And you need to tell me that where it has opened its plant, okay, in the comment section. So this would enable us to move in the direction of circular economy. Circular economy, let me just brief you that how it is different from linear economy. In linear economy, what we do? We take the raw material, we produce a particular product, we use the product and we throw that particular product. But in circular economy, what we do? Let's suppose you have a mobile phone. Now you have stopped using the mobile phone because your newer version of iPhone has been released by Apple. Okay. Now what happens? You have discarded that particular phone. That materials which are there in that particular phone could be used, or it could be resale to any other individual who wants the previous version of iPhone. So that's how we give a boost to circular economy. Instead of completely discarding that particular product, we try to reuse that again and again. Reuse, recycle, okay? Then at retail end, what all things we can do? We need to ensure that the surplus food is redirected to food banks and to community kitchens. And the surplus food, with the help of this food banks, this should be provided to shelter homes, okay, and to the NGOs which are running or which are providing the shelter to animals also. So that not just human beings, but even the animals should not go to sleep with an empty belly. Then we can adopt the global best practices like what we have in case of US, wherein under the PATH Act of 2015, the US government is providing tax deduction to the organizations who are doing food donations. Then we need to change our behavior. Okay, ultimately it is a societal problem, so it needs a solution driven by society itself. So being an aware citizen, I want all of you to make a promise today that from now onwards, you will be ordering food only what you need, okay? Purchase only what is necessary. Don't waste the food. Then we need to conduct representative national food waste studies so that we have adequate data. And based on that data, we can come up with evidence-based policy, okay? And going further, the NGOs should collaborate and they should enhance the awareness among the people that how they can reduce the food wastage. And in the educational curriculum also, we need to bring the requisite change so that we are not guided by materialistic culture. Okay, we order the food what is actually needed by us. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. I have framed a practice question for you people. So do practice this question based on the discussion that we had. With this, let's move on to the next topic. Now, recently, the Silicon Valley companies have started expecting the new employees to work for 72 hours in a week. That means they're not supposed to work from 9 to 5. Rather, they are supposed to work for 12 hours a day. That means 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. This is actually being referred to be as hustle culture. This particular topic you can associate with GS paper 4 with work culture. Now, what is work culture? So, work culture basically refers to a set of shared values, beliefs and the norms that shape the people behave, how people behave, interact in the workplace. And it is basically influenced by the leadership, by company's history, okay, what all ideas basically guide the working of that particular company and the employee demographics. Now, let's just understand what are the new emerging trends when it comes to work culture. So, first is quiet quitting, wherein an employee would be doing the bare minimum work which is required of them. That means if your shift ends at 5 p.m., I would not be doing extra work. I would leave the office right at 5 p.m. Okay, and you will start demanding extra pay for whatever extra work you are doing. When we witness quiet quitting, when the employees start feeling that the management is not at all concerned with his or her welfare. Then another trend is moonlighting. What is moonlighting? Let's suppose you are working with a company A from 9 to 5. Then after this working hour, you are also working with a company B, which are in the same sector, and you have not informed this company A. Okay, that is what is moonlighting. And why moonlighting? Because usually you will be working for this company B after the office hour, during the night or during the weekends. So it basically refers to the act of working an extra job beyond regular working hours, usually without the knowledge of the employer. And this is being done by the people. Why? To get extra money, okay, and to learn new skills also. But this is problematic for this particular company A. Why? Because they think that it is a kind of cheating, and this would not enable the particular employee to focus more on the work related to this company A. So that would hamper its productivity when it comes to the work related to company A. Then we have another term, that is hustle culture, wherein the organization is putting in front of you unrealistic targets, and there's a pressure from the top management that you have to attain this target within less working hours. And this is quite common if you look into the sales team of any particular company or an organization, okay, wherein unrealistic targets are put in front of them and they are told to meet these targets, in less amount of time so that they could be promoted. And hustle culture, what happens in this? You would be thinking about the work only, even during your vacation, even when you have a day off. Now, let's just understand what all are the characteristics of a healthy work culture. First and foremost, there needs to be clear and open communication. So, communication should not only be top to bottom, it should be bottom to top also. Okay, and there should be open communication among the employees which are at same strata also. For example, you can quote the best practice of Google weekly question, wherein the lower staff would be asking the question to the top management. And with respect to this clear and open communication, you can also mention the open door policy, okay, which is there in different organizations. Let's suppose I, being an employee, I have some concerns with respect to the working condition. I can directly go to my boss cabin and I can share my concern, or if I have innovative idea, I can share with my boss as well. Okay, so he would be readily accessible to me. Then there should be trust and respect. In a healthy work culture, the LGBT community, the women, would not be undergoing work-related hostilities. Then a sense of belonging. This enhances the association of a particular employee with that organization if he or she feels that he or she is also a valued member of that particular organization. For example, Tata Motors run the Grihini Social Welfare Society, wherein it provides some sort of training to the employees, women dependents. Okay, and Tata also provided monetary support to the employees who lost their life during the COVID-19 pandemic also. So this enhances a sense of belonging among the employees. Then adequate opportunity should be there for growth and development of a particular employee, and this becomes all the more important in this AI era. Okay, so you can quote this best practice, that is Tata Tea provides vocational training to physically challenged person in the art of making recycled paper. Then there should be work-life balance. So here you can quote the best practice, Google's employee wellness program, wherein it is providing free mental health resources to its employees. Okay. Then there should be recognition and appreciation. If I'm doing good work, I should be appreciated by my seniors. I should be promoted also. This is, usually one of the concern when it comes to the public sector organization, wherein the promotion is basically based on seniority and not on the basis of how much good work you are doing. Okay. Then there should be a sense of purpose. The employee should feel that we are contributing something to the world. Okay, here you can quote the best practice of Tesla, how it promotes the innovation culture, how it promotes its employees to come forward and share their innovative ideas with the top management which is there. Okay, so the top management is always accessible to the employees. They have a very flat, hierarchical structure is not there. They have a very flexible structure. So the employee, if he or she has a good innovative idea, they can directly approach the top management. Okay. Why? Because they have a sense of purpose that we are bringing change in the society with the help of technology. Let's just understand what is the difference in the work culture when you talk about public sector as well as private sector. When you talk about the public sector, herein the purpose is to serve the public interest, uphold the rule of law, and to provide essential services to the citizen. Whereas when you talk about private sector, the sole purpose is to generate profits for its shareholders or its owners. Then when you talk about the structure in the public sector, we know that it is hierarchical in nature and all the decisions are subjected to scrutiny. Okay, so here there is major emphasis on adherence to rules and regulation. However, when you talk about the private sector, right now we discussed the example of Tesla, how they have a flatter organizational structure which enhances quick decision making and promotes efficiency and innovation also. Then when you talk about recognition and appreciation, I told you when it comes to public sector, here the promotion is based on seniority, so you don't have incentive to do good work. Whereas when you talk about the private sector, herein the promotion is based on your performance. So the better you are performing, the better innovative ideas you are having, you would be promoted earlier. Then when you talk about work-life balance, it is better when you talk about the public sector because you have generous leave policies and predictable working hours. But when you talk about private sector, here the work-life balance is usually distorted. Why? Because of the hustle culture being promoted by the top management in certain companies. Okay, and there is also strict leave policy also. Now, what all issues are there in the work culture in India? First and foremost, there is toxic work environment. Sadly, last year we got to know the suicide committed by one of the employees of Ernst & Young because of the back-breaking work she has to do. Why? Because the companies in India are pressurizing the employees to work for longer working hours. Then there is non-inclusiveness. Usually there is discrimination at the recruitment stage with respect to the people belonging to LGBT community, women, Divyangs, and often they are subjected to work-related hostilities. Then there is biased performance evaluation system. This is quite common when it comes to bureaucracy. The honest civil servants are not given crucial postings. However, the bureaucrats who are close to the political masters, they are given crucial postings. Then mental health challenges. Previously, we used to witness a lot of suicide cases with respect to CISF, which is one of the paramilitary forces. Why? Because of long working hours, unclear job roles, lack of appreciation from the seniors and strict leave policies. Then nowadays, we are witnessing the issue of corporate donkeys. Why? Because the top management is glorifying overworked, underpaid culture. Okay, what we discussed, hustle culture. Then unrealistic expectations are there. Recently, there was a report which pointed out toxic work culture when it comes to SEBI, where the employees were given unrealistic work deadlines and targets, okay, which negatively impacted their work-life balance as well as mental health. Now, the last thing that we need to know with regard to this particular topic is how an organization can improve the work culture. So first and foremost, if the organization wants its workforce to remain productive for a longer period of time, it needs to enable the employee to balance its work life effectively. In this respect, we can learn from Australia right to disconnect, wherein the employees have been given this right that beyond their working hours, they can refuse to accept the work-related calls, work-related emails, WhatsApp messages, etc. Then the organization needs to focus upon mental well-being of its employees. So in this respect, you can quote the best practice of CISF, Project MAN, okay, which has showed progress. We have witnessed 40% less decline in the suicide rates among the CISF employees. So under this particular program, the CISF is providing adequate training to its employees, and it is doing early detection of mental health related challenges, okay, and it is providing counseling services as well. Then we need to do capacity building, especially in the era of artificial intelligence. So here you can quote the best practice of Google, wherein they have Googler to Googler program, wherein one employee would be training the another employee. And this is how they would be improving their skill set. Then leadership also have a great role in improving the work culture. So here you can quote E. Sridharan, that how he put in place reverse clock with respect to completion of Delhi Metro Phase 1. So the deadline for this Phase 1 was 2005, but he reduced it to 2002. And the Phase 1 of Delhi Metro was completed by 2002. And he also put in place the oath of integrity for the Delhi Metro employees. Okay. So that improved their sense of belonging to this particular organization also. Then there should be open communication. Herein you can mention the open door policy also, and here you can talk about Tesla or Google, okay, how they have a flat hierarchical structure and how the top management is accessible to the employees. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. I have framed a practice question for you people, so do practice this question based on the discussion that we have. With this, let's move on to the simplified section. Now, beginning with the first topic in the simplified section, an editorial has appeared in The Hindu which talks about the looming threat of Engel's pause in an AI-shaped world. This particular topic you can associate with the economy section of our prelim syllabus and the employment topic in GS paper 3. Now, this threat has been pointed out recently by Nobel laureate Geoffrey Hinton, and he has said that inequality is going to increase in the AI era, and that is why he hinted that in the modern times we are going to witness Engel's pause. What is this Engel's pause? This term was first used by Robert Allen, and he was basically inspired by the Engel's law, which was given by Friedrich Engels. Now, what is this Engel law? Let's understand with a simple example. Let's suppose initially you were earning 100 rupees and you were spending 50 rupees out of this 100 rupee of your income on food. So, in percentage terms, you were spending 50% of your income on food. Now, let's suppose your salary increased to 1000. Now, in absolute terms, you are spending more on food. You are spending 300. But in percentage terms, you are spending merely 30%. And that is what the Engel law actually states. In absolute terms, your expenditure on food is not going down. But in percentage terms, your expenditure on food will go down. Then what is Engel's pause? So, Engel's pause was coined in the 19th century when we were witnessing industrialization in the British economy, wherein output was increasing, but the wages were not increasing. That means inequality was increasing, more money was going in the pockets of capitalists. So when your wages would not be increasing, ultimately you would be spending a higher percentage of your income on food. That is what is Engel's pause. Now, recently the article is pointing out that in the recent time also we are facing this looming threat of Engel's pause because of this AI era. Now, Why they are proposing this thing, that in the modern times we would be witnessing this angel pause? Because of the recent Stanford paper titled Canaries in the Coal Mine, 6 Facts About the Recent Employment Effects of Artificial Intelligence, which points out that how the younger workforce is more vulnerable to AI-induced shifts in the economy. And you can very well understand this with the help of example of TCS. It has recently laid off 12,000 employees. Why? Because their skill set was not in alignment with what the TCS company was demanding. Because of this AI, the pause are likely because capital or technology deepening would be creating oligarchic entrepreneurs, and the benefits would not be shared with the rest of the labor force. Basically, inequalities would be widening. This is what this paper pointed out. Now, the writer is pointing out that whether we are moving in this direction of angel's pause or not, for this we need to witness some signs. We need to observe some signs. So, first sign is we need to observe that whether we are witnessing productivity gains but stagnant wages. This is something that we witnessed in the British economy also during the 19th century. Output was increasing, that means productivity gains were there, but wages were stagnant. Okay, so similar thing we need to observe in the present scenario. And this is presently there if you look at the call centers in Philippines, wherein the AI co-pilots have boosted the productivity by 30 to 50%, but the wages have not increased in the same proportion, and rather the workload has been intensified. Then the second thing that we need to observe is whether the cost of complements, okay, you need cloud computing, retraining, data access, cyber security in order to effectively tap the potential of artificial intelligence. So what is the second sign that we need to observe? That whether the price of these complements is rising or not, and this is something that we are witnessing. Okay, the price of these complements are rising, and rather in this AI era, the workers are being forced to take, upskilling program because they want to remain relevant to the organization. Then the third sign that we need to observe is increasing inequality. Okay, and this has been validated by the PwC estimate that AI could add 15.7 trillion to global GDP by 2030, but the benefits would be concentrated in the hands of few. Okay, that is US, China, and a handful of firms which would be controlling the foundational models of artificial intelligence. And this has been validated by IMF as well in its 2024 estimate that 40% of the jobs worldwide are exposed to artificial intelligence. This highlights what? That ultimately the benefit would be not reaching to the larger workforce. Okay, it would be concentrating in the hand of few countries and few global giants, which would be controlling the artificial intelligence technology. Then the fourth sign that we need to look into is whether there is job displacement and there is, changes in the task or not. So again, we are seeing the sign. Doctors are being complemented with ChatGPT. Nowadays, any of you witnessing any symptom, instead of visiting to a doctor, you prefer ChatGPT. Okay. And this is something that we are witnessing in China also. Researchers from Tuanxia University have started world's first AI-powered hospital. And artificial intelligence is also making inroads in education, finance, public management, and infrastructure management. With respect to education, I have an interesting, example to share with you. One of my students who came to me and said that, ma'am, I am reading economics optional with the help of ChatGPT. It's fine that you are using the technology, but please refer to your books also to make sure that you are not getting distorted facts from ChatGPT. Okay. Now, what more needs to be done so that we can make sure that the benefits are not concentrated in the hands of few corporations or few countries? It should be shared with the larger workforce. For that, what we need to do? We need to provide adequate skill training. So in this respect, India can learn from Singapore's Skill Future program, which is providing continuous education credits for workers because they are reskilling themselves and they are making themselves relevant in this era of Industry 4.0. And we can also learn from Abu Dhabi, which has put in place world's first AI university. Okay, so we also need to pay adequate attention to the skill training of our larger workforce. Then what we discussed, what would be one of the sole cause of angel pause? That is rising inequality. So we need to address this rising inequality. How? Through redistribution of AI rents. So for this, we can come up with the idea of universal basic income. That means irrespective of your income status, government would be providing you some amount of money. Okay. And in return, the government would not demand you to do any work. Okay. Or in order to redistribute the AI rents, the companies who are actually taking the benefits of this artificial intelligence technology, they should run some philanthropic activities. Okay, they should provide the funds for philanthropic activities. Like Chan Zuckerberg initiative is providing whatever benefits it is gaining from the artificial intelligence. It is providing that fund for education, for biotechnology, etc. Then artificial intelligence infrastructure should be treated on a priority basis as public good. Now see, we understand that in the current times, data is the new oil. So the government need to make sure that data is not a monopoly of a few powerful corporations. Okay. So for this, what we need to do, we need to make sure that the data, the computational technology is a public good. So in this respect, we can learn from K2think.ai and Apparatus, which is an initiative of UAE and Switzerland respectively. Okay, so UAE has come up with this K2think.ai and Apparatus is an initiative of Switzerland government, wherein they are making sure that they are coming up with open AI reasoning model in order to make sure that this data, which is the food of artificial intelligence technology, is not concentrated in the hands of few, basically making it a public good, okay, which can be accessed by anyone. In the end, the writer is pointing out that some of the people would say that this angel's pause is overstated. Why? Because unlike the 19th century, today the government is guided by the idea of welfare state. We have stronger democratic institutions and there's rapid distribution of the technology. As you can see in India also, more than 80% of the people have access to smartphones. Okay. And further, the article points out that AI has the potential to lower the cost also. If you talk about healthcare, education, clean energy. Okay. So this is going to enhance the welfare of the larger section of any economy. So that is the reason some people would say that this concern that in the recent time we would be witnessing angel's pause, it is overstated. But what would be the duration of this angel pause? It depends upon the political will. Okay. So the government needs to make sure that this AI is not just a productivity revolution, but a human welfare revolution. Basically, what all steps we have discussed, that needs to be implemented effectively. Okay, so the duration of this angel pause would depend upon that how effectively the government takes the steps that we have discussed previously. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently, the climate activist, that is Sonam Wangchu, has been detained under the NSA. This particular topic you can associate with the polity section of your prelim syllabus. Now, the climate activist has been detained under the National Security Act, and this has brought the focus back on one of the prominent preventive detention law, that is National Security Act, which has been used by the government in the past to keep the separatists and gangster in preventive detention, who basically pose a threat to public order or national security. Now, before we understand the different provisions of this particular act, first thing that you need to understand is what is the distinction between preventive detention and punitive detention. Preventive detention is wherein you are kept in detention without a trial by a court and without a conviction by a court. But when you talk about punitive detention, herein you are put behind the bar. Why? Because you have committed a offense and you have been put behind the bars after the trial before a court and the court has ordered the conviction. When you talk about preventive detention, why a person, even when that person has not committed any offense, is kept under detention? Basically, to make sure that that person do not, pose a threat to public order or create any national security related challenges. You need to make sure that the person who has been kept under preventive detention has not committed any offense. Okay. So, it is basically a precautionary measure. But when you talk about punitive detention, here the purpose is to punish the person. Why? Because that person has already committed a offense. Okay. Now you need to make note of Article 22, which basically provides protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. Now Article 22 Clause 1 basically provides the arrested person the right to be consulted and to be defended by a legal practitioner of his or her choice. Clause 2 gives the right to a person who is detained to be produced before the magistrate within 24 hours excluding the journey time. Clause 3 states that nothing which is mentioned under Clause 1 and 2 shall apply to any person who has been arrested or detained under any law which provides for preventive detention. And Clause 4 states that no law providing for preventive detention shall authorize the detention of a person for a period longer than 3 months unless and until an advisory board, which would be consisting of basically the judges of the High Court, they would be looking into that whether this person should be kept under preventive detention or not. And that person would be kept under preventive detention beyond this period of 3 months only when this advisory board feels that yes, it is sufficient, okay, and there is a sufficient cause to keep that person under preventive detention. Such a person is detained in accordance with the provision of any law which is made by the Parliament. You need to make note of this thing, that when you go by the union list, Parliament has the exclusive power to enact the laws which are dealing with preventive detention for reasons that are connected with defense, foreign affairs or security of India. And if you go by the concurrent list, both Parliament and state legislatures have the power to enact laws for reasons related to maintenance of public order, maintenance of supplies or essential services to the community. So in the prelims you can get a question like this thing, that only the Parliament has the exclusive power to make a law related to preventive detention. The answer would be no. Both the Parliament as well as state legislatures are allowed. But if this thing is provided that on these grounds it is only the Parliament's exclusive right to make a law, in that case the statement would be correct. In general, both have the power. Now, what is this National Security Act, which was enacted in 1980? So it gives the center and the state government the power to detain any individual, basically to prevent them from acting in a manner which is going to create challenges for national security, or they are going to create any challenge with respect to maintenance of public order. Under this, the district magistrate or police commissioner can exercise these powers. And here the detention is preventive detention. It is not a punitive detention. We have already understood the difference between punitive and preventive detention. Now, how this act came about and what is the intent? So when you talk about preventive detention, it is, dating back to colonial times, wherein this preventive detention thing was used by the colonial masters to basically, suppress the dissent. Then after independence, we came up with Preventive Detention Act of 1950, which was followed by MISA Act of 1991, which was vehemently criticized because it was misused during the emergency. And that is the reason when you talk about MISA, this was repealed in 1978. And 2 years later we came up with National Security Act, which gave the government the powers, wide powers to deal with threats related to security, law and order, essential supplies, and building in some procedural safeguards also, okay, because safeguards were lacking when it comes to the MISA Act. So procedural safeguards were incorporated in the NSA so that we can effectively balance the liberty of an individual who is kept under preventive detention and, making sure that the government has adequate teeth to basically manage any threat which is relating to national security. So detention order under this particular act is executed like a warrant of arrest. Once a person is, kept under preventive detention, that person can be held in a specified place. The authorities could say that you are put in preventive detention in your home only. Okay, you are not allowed to go outside. Or they can move that person across the state, and that person would be subjected to any condition that would be set by the government for that matter. Now, what are procedural safeguards we put into place when it comes to National Security Act, which was missing in the MISA Act? So in this, we have put in place that the ground of detention needs to be communicated to the person who is being kept under preventive detention within 5 days, and to a maximum within 15 days, the authority needs to communicate that person that why that person is being kept under the preventive detention. Only then that person would be able to make a representation to the government, and an advisory board of High Court judges would be reviewing the case within 3 weeks of the detention. And if they find that there is no sufficient cause for the detention, then the detentee must be released. Detention cannot orderly exceed 12 months, though it may be revoked earlier also. At the same time, there are limitations also with respect to this particular act, which highlights that this act is prone to misuse also. Like, detainee has no right to legal representation before the advisory board, which is going to take a decision that whether that person should be kept under preventive detention or not, or whether there are sufficient cause to keep that person under preventive detention. Before that, the detainee do not have the right to make a legal representation. And the government may withhold facts in public interest. Although we have provided this safeguard that the ground of detention needs to be communicated to the person, but if disclosure of those grounds goes against public interest, then the government can withhold the facts also. And that is the reason the various officials have pointed out that this gives wide discretionary power to the government officials, and that is why it is prone to misuse also. Now, what all legal options are available before the climate activist? He can challenge the detention order by filing a representation to the government. Okay, right now we started that this is one of the procedural safeguard. Or he can wait for the opinion of the advisory board. He can move to Supreme Court or High Court, okay, to contest the legality of his detention. He can seek revocation if the government decides that detention is unnecessary. This act allows authorities to hold him without filing formal charges or proceeding evidence in the open court, and that is why this act is prone to misuse. Over the years, the courts and the civil society organization have highlighted that this particular act is prone to misuse. For example, in 2020, when Dr. Kafil Khan was put under preventive detention by the Uttar Pradesh government for an alleged inflammatory speech. Then in Madhya Pradesh, people were kept in preventive detention because of the cases related to love jihad. And people have been kept under preventive detention. Why? Because they were doing cow slaughter. And that is the reason the civil society organization criticized that the definition of national security is not well defined when it comes to this particular act. How can you relate national security with cow slaughter and love jihad cases? Okay, so that is problematic. And in 2012, Supreme Court struck down the detention of a man who was accused of black marketing kerosene. Black marketing kerosene, do you think it is a threat to national security? That is the reason the Supreme Court, ultimately ordered the release of that particular person. So all these instances point out that this act is prone to misuse. Okay, that's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently, the UN has imposed certain sanctions on Iran over its nuclear program. This particular topic you can associate with prelims international organizations. Now, first and foremost, before we understand the context, you need to understand the background. That is, what is this Iran nuclear deal? So, this was signed in 2015 and it is formally known as Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And this was a result of prolonged negotiation between Iran and P5+1 countries. So, what are P5+1 countries? China, Russia, France, UK and US plus one is Germany. So ultimately the deal was finalized in 2015. So under this deal, Iran agreed to significantly cut its stores of centrifuge, enriched uranium and heavy water, which are basically components for making a nuclear bomb. And it also agreed that the UN, nuclear watchdog, that is International Atomic Energy Agency, would be having the, right that it can visit the nuclear sites of Iran and make sure that Iran is not developing a nuclear bomb. Okay, so under this particular deal, what all happened? Arak, which was a planned heavy water reactor, was redesigned to avoid production of weapon grade plutonium. And Fordo was converted from fuel enrichment to technology center. And the only uranium enrichment plant which is there currently in Iran is Natanz. Okay, so in exchange, UN, European Union and US basically lifted the nuclear related sanction, and this enabled the Iran economy to come on track, because previously when the sanctions were imposed by European Union, UN, US, okay, this crippled the Iranian economy. So after this particular deal, these nuclear related sanctions were lifted, and billions of dollars which were earlier freezed, they were unfreezed, and this reopened the Iran's access to global oil and finance market. So it benefited the Iran, okay, come on track. It was able to bring its economy on track after, suffering from years of recession. But then in 2018, when Donald Trump was the president of US basically, withdrew from this particular Iran nuclear deal, arguing that it is defensive at its core, because there was a sunset clause which the Trump highlighted that this would enable Iran to resume enrichment. What was the sunset clause? That under which the Iran agreed to cap uranium enrichment at roughly 3% for 15 years. So the Donald Trump highlighted that after 15 years, Iran can again resume the nuclear enrichment, okay, and Iran can develop a nuclear bomb. So that is the reason, this was the reason given by Donald Trump at that time, and due to this, the US exited from this particular deal. Now what happened after the withdrawal of US? Iran response was, it, moved away from the constraints that were imposed under this Iran nuclear deal, and ultimately when USA striked on the Islam Revolutionary Guard Corps commander, then in that respect, Iran stated that it would no longer commit to this nuclear enrichment related restrictions that were imposed under this Iran nuclear deal. And in 2021, Iran stated that it would not allow the UN nuclear watchdog, that is International Atomic Energy Agency, to inspect its facilities. Okay. Now, after this, what happened? European powers were negotiating with Iran, and they tried to delay the imposition of the sanctions on Iran. And they were putting a pressure on Iran that it needs to restore the right of the UN nuclear watchdog, that is International Atomic Energy Agency, so that we can make sure that you are not doing uranium enrichment and developing a nuclear bomb. And they were also putting a pressure on Iran that it should engage in talk with USA also. But then Britain, France and Germany, they initiated the return of sanctions on Iran at the UN Security Council, pointing out that Iran is violating the 2015 nuclear deal. And this brings an end to the decade-long nuclear deal, which originally was agreed by these countries. We have already discussed that. And experts are pointing out that this would exacerbate the tensions in the Middle East. Currently, we are already witnessing the tensions between Israel and Iran. And this is going to further aggravate the situation. So, when you talk about the sanctions, what all sanctions have been imposed by the UN? So, the sanctions prohibit Iran from enriching uranium at any level, okay? And it has banned the travel of a range of Iranian diplomats, entities and individuals, and it has authorized the countries to stop and inspect the cargo which is traveling from Iran to their particular country, including the oil tankers as well. So these are the sanctions which have been imposed by the UN on Iran. Although the European powers have pointed out that the UN sanction is not an end of diplomacy, they are, right now also they are making a request to Iran that you return to compliance. Comply with what all you have agreed to under the Iran nuclear deal. Okay, so that's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently the government has eased the Hindi requirement with respect to Eklavya residential model schools. This particular topic you can associate with the government policies with respect to prelims syllabus. Now, before we understand the context, you need to understand what is this Eklavya model residential schools. So this is an initiative of Ministry of Tribal Affairs, and wherein the ministry is trying to provide quality residential education to the student belonging to scheduled tribe from class 6th to class 12th in remote areas. This initiative was started in 1998, and in 2018-19 the initiative was revamped, so it was made a central sector scheme, and the geographical coverage was also enhanced. So when it was revamped in 2018 and 19, the government stated that now such schools would be set up in every block which is having more than 50% of the scheduled tribe population and which have at least 20,000 tribal persons. Okay, so government has put up a target that we would be building 728 such schools, okay, across the country by 2026. And which is the implementing agency for this particular initiative? So it is the National Education Society for Tribal Students, which again functions under the Ministry of Tribal Affairs only. Now let's just look into the certain features of these schools. So it is a co-educational residential school, basically providing education to both boys as well as girls from class 6 to class 12. And we are trying to build these schools at par with Navodaya Vidyalayas. So the government would be putting in place adequate school infrastructure, okay, classroom, administrative block, there would be hostels for boys and girls, accommodation would be there for teaching as well as non-teaching staff, okay, labs would also be there. And CBSE curriculum would be followed in these schools and education is completely free when it comes to such schools. Each school would be having a capacity of 480 students and equal number of seats would be there for girls and boys. Okay, so it is also guided by the idea of gender equality in education. And when you talk about the non-scheduled tribe students, they can also be admitted in the schools up to 10% of the total seats. And 20% of the seats are reserved for the ST students who have performed well in the sports. So 20% sports quota is there for deserving ST students. Now what all changes have been introduced? So the government has relaxed the norms when it comes to Hindi competency in the latest recruitment guidelines for teaching as well as non-teaching staff. So when it comes to the preliminary written exam, that is TGT, candidates would be marked based on their language competency component based on how they perform in 3 languages, that is English, Hindi and a scheduled or a regional language of their choice. So this would be a 30-mark component and it would be only qualifying in nature. So a candidate needs to score 12 marks in all the 3 languages. But one thing that you need to make note of is at the postgraduate level, okay, basically the teachers who are providing or, teaching services to students who are there in class 9 to 12, for them, Hindi competency is still there, okay, it would continue. And if you go by the central government EMRS dashboard, we have 722 sanctioned such, schools, Eklavya model residential schools. 479 are functional and 235 are under construction. And as I told you, in 2018-19, it was revamped and it became a central sector scheme. From that, the union government took control over the staff recruitment. Okay, that's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the last topic of today's analyst. So, a big development for India, especially in the domain of space technology. The AstroSat, which was supposed to function for 5 years, has completed 10 years. This particular topic you can associate it with space technology in the prelim syllabus. So, India's first dedicated space astronomy observatory, that is AstroSat, has completed 10 years of operation. So, it was launched way back in 2015 with PSLV C-30 XL rocket. And it was launched from Satish Dhawan Space Center, which is there in Sriharikota. So as I told you, the designed mission life of this AstroSat was 5 years, but it has continued to provide valuable data with respect to space for 10 years. So it has provided data with respect to black holes, neutron stars, nearest stars, Proxima Centauri, and first detection of FUV photons from galaxy 9.3 billion, which is 9.3 billion light years away. So these are the major, valuable insights which was provided by AstroSat. So let's look into certain prelim pointers with regard to AstroSat. So it is India's first dedicated multi-wavelength space observatory, which is aimed at studying celestial, objects in X-ray, optical as well as UV spectral bands. And how it is able to do so? With the help of its 5 payloads. What are its 5 payloads? So one is your soft X-ray telescope, scanning sky monitor, cadmium zinc telluride imager, ultraviolet imaging telescope, large area X-ray proportional counter. So these are the 5 payloads. And when you talk about the operational control, which is the entity which is operating this particular AstroSat. So it is Missions Operations Complex of ISRO, okay, which is there in Bangalore, which manages the satellite. What are the objectives? Basically to understand high energy processes which are there in the binary star system containing neutron star and black holes, estimate the magnetic field of neutron stars, study star birth regions, high energy processes in star system lying beyond our galaxy, and detecting new briefly bright X-ray sources in sky. So these are the objective of this particular AstroSat mission. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Quiz would be coming right up next. So don't forget to practice the quiz. Till then, keep smiling, keep learning. Have a great day all of you.